Hello and welcome to the 10th episode of the Highlighter Podcast. I'm your host, Mark Isero. Thank you so much for being here and listening in, whether it's your first time or whether you're coming back to the podcast. This is a place where we all talk about some of the best articles that were featured in last Thursday's newsletter. And I'm really excited to share with you who is on the show this week. It's Niki Magtoto, and she works in education in San Francisco at SFUSD, and I'm really happy to have her on the show because I've known her for a long time, and I also value very, very much her experience as well as her perspective. So let's get right into that interview. Hi, Niki.
Hi, Mark.
How are you?
I'm good.
It's really good to be here.
I'm glad. Welcome to my home.
Yeah, totally in your home. You know, the podcast, it's much better when it's in somebody's home, so thank you.
No problem.
I want to know a little bit more, and so does the audience, about you, about who you are, and then perhaps also why you're a subscriber, and then also what you do.
Sure. So Mark Isero got me into college. That's how I'm going to start this introduction. Just kidding. He did help, though. So I first met Mark as a senior in high school in his first year teaching at Leadership High. And so I am a subscriber because I love what you have curated, how you curate and bring people together, even in person. So I'm really happy to be a part of getting to talk to everybody about an article. I am an educational policy analyst for San Francisco Unified. I work on programs focused on children whose parents are incarcerated and homeless students, but I've been in the district for about 6 years. Prior to this, I was a teacher recruiter for almost 6 years before taking this on.
Yeah, it's great. And you are from San Francisco.
Third generation.
And I want you to talk about that too, like what it means to you.
Sure. It's very important to me. I have it tattooed on me in 2 different ways. That's how important it is. I have really had San Francisco embedded in me, not just because I've lived here and my mom and dad were born, well, my mom was born here and my grandmother was born here, but because it is a reflection of who I am in terms of its diversity, or previous diversity, I should say. I got to learn so many different things just by being in this very large, cross-cultural, cross-community place. And I wouldn't trade it for anything, and I want to make sure our young people get those experiences too. If I had children, I would want them to also get those experiences. So it's a pretty important piece of who I am, and it's very important to me to preserve what I can of that.
And then what do you think is your role now, given that San Francisco has changed so much? You say previous diversity. Like, is that partly why you're in public school stuff? Like, how do you go around sort of protecting San Francisco?
Yes. I think that one thing about it is that I fell into education. I said I didn't want to be a teacher, but everyone said I should be a teacher. I said I wasn't going to get into education, and here I am, having studied it, having lived in the actual system for 6 years. So I think that first and foremost, the preservation part came from the fact that I had really amazing teachers as a kid, and that's how I landed in the sort of teacher recruitment role, was making sure that students had great teachers as well, making sure those teachers became and blended into the community that was pre-established in the schools. So I do think that there's certain levels of protection that I kind of employ in the work that I have done. In the new job, really making sure that students who are already impacted by a variety of really crummy things happening in their lives are able to still access the same learning I did, access the same, or better, I should say, because I hope it's better, the same experiences I did in school, and really be a part of this community. Like, I don't want them to be further marginalized by also being said or being told they don't fit in some way, shape, or form. So, sure, I totally protect that aspect of it.
Sounds great. I want to know which article you want to talk about.
Let's talk about the Jefferson County article.
Sounds great. You probably know how I feel about the author, I follow her around, and I don't want to be a stalker or anything, but I saw her at the Commonwealth. I was so happy when you chose this article, just because I like Nikole Hannah-Jones so much. Why'd you choose it?
The truth is, I actually didn't make the decision until early yesterday morning because I read several of this week's articles, and yes, the Ta-Nehisi Coates article is probably going to be one of the most viral things to come out of this week, but it was too hard. And then the snake charming thing was just fascinating, but I didn't hit my heartbeats in any way, shape, or form. So this one felt real and felt very connected to kind of how my community has changed here in San Francisco and the work that I do every day.
So yeah, what do you want to talk about first? What sort of hit you most?
I think that there was with the amazing twist with the judge.
I was reading it and I was like, I was all excited finally for a positive ending.
Yeah.
Well, I guess it's a spoiler, but they need to read it.
If you didn't read it, there's a twist.
Yeah, why do you think that happened? What was going on? I mean, like, she explains it, but I haven't read the entire opinion because it's 162 pages or whatever.
Yeah, not going to happen unless I really am awake at night about it. I don't. And then to add on to that, to be a lawyer who was a part of the first trial that essentially ordered schools be desegregated, and now to be on this sort of rehashing of it as a retired volunteer lawyer. Sorry, why do I think that happened? I think there's still so much we do in regards to respectability politics around race. So to parallel this article to the Coates article, in that so many of our foundational decisions as a country are based on this sort of race fear and this idea of preserving some whiteness. While that is embedded deeply in this particular story, she needed to make a point and say, hey guys, this is wrong. But say, but I guess I'll give you a chance to prove me that maybe you're not all racist.
It didn't make any sense.
I absolutely not. So that was the thing that I walked away completely baffled by.
It was really disturbing, and it made me mad because I really did think that it was going to be a triumphant ending, that somehow Brown versus Board might exist somewhere, and you sort of had to know, like, if you know any of Nikole Hannah-Jones's, like, it's going to be pessimistic at the end.
Right.
But I was like, oh, this is going to be different, but it totally wasn't.
It was not.
I mean, she totally makes plain in the article that integration was working.
Right.
That actually the schools were pretty good, that there was no harm in this town. Specifically, there were not really complaints of the school, especially this big new school. But somehow they just didn't, like, the white parents did not want to have their kids be learning with African-American kids.
Because of the two black kids that were in the school were totally fine. Like, right? It's an interesting dynamic where it's like integration is working because the very small percentage of people who were in these communities who were not white were just fine. Mm-hmm. So that it might be factually true that integration was working, but clearly that's not necessarily the world we want to live in. At the same time, I understand if you don't have more people to suddenly make the area more diverse. You can't just invent them out of thin air in so many ways, but with all of the information around busing and the other school areas that had a little bit more African-American students, or who knows what else, maybe some random Mexicans, because we get everywhere. I don't know. That part was particularly difficult for me because that's not just enough.
Yeah. And I think that from sort of like where I sit, like, I have like the whole educator thing about integration. And then I also have sort of like the reality of just sort of living. And it's easy to sort of say and to blame like this southern town.
Yeah.
But you know what? Just everywhere. And that's what she makes this point also, how
right.
urban like school districts are as or more northern, specifically New York, she talks about as well in another article, how urban school districts are as segregated as well, and that I sometimes talk to my white friends who have not have parents, who have kids. Thank you. They have parents too, probably. But this thing about, oh, I really want schools to be integrated, but
Right.
for my kid, I'm going to make
Right.
a different choice.
Right. Right.
So at least like this town in Alabama is just really being more real in some ways.
Right. I mean, maybe for Alabama, this is still really progressive. I don't know. I've never lived in Alabama. I do have a friend who I call Alabama Chris, and he is everything Alabama to me. But I don't plan on living in Alabama anytime soon. But we do see those same things replicated, even in large districts like San Francisco Unified. We have a ton of different programs and laws and enrollment policies that are designed to make sure that schools are as diverse as possible, that every student has access to all of our schools. But there are certain things that just inherently cause moments of segregation, if you will. Mm-hmm. We have an amazing bilingual program in the district. I'm a product of it. I went to a dual immersion K through 5 school where I learned to read and write in English and Spanish at the same time, and it was fantastic considering, my family's from all over, and we didn't really have any home language other than English, and I wouldn't trade it for anything else. But other programs, particularly ones that rhyme with Schmandarin, are programs that inherently end up segregating students. It's due to who decides to enroll in them, what parents feel like their students should be multilingual in certain languages, and in essence, it is something that we can't control unless we force families to suddenly enroll in these programs. I don't think it's anything we'd ever want to do, to say, hey, you have to learn. I think they're exploring Arabic and Vietnamese biliteracy pathways, which wouldn't be full immersion models, but those teachers don't exist. I know because I've experienced that. A. B, you can't force that on someone.
Yeah. And I'm sure that you don't, like, in your work in San Francisco, you haven't necessarily worked directly, like, with the school choice lottery, how parents sort of choose several options, and then because of desegregation, you don't necessarily know firsthand. But, like, one thing that I have thought is that it's not necessarily messaged. Like, the public is not really buying the whole desegregation thing, even in San Francisco anymore. And this is what Nikole Hannah-Jones would probably say.
You're wearing her hat right now.
Well, I feel like So, is that maybe people in theory like this idea of schools being integrated, but I, as a parent, want to be able to have the best school, meaning in a scarcity model,
right?
And I want to go right next door to where I live, and I want to have a certain percentage of white students there, and it has to have really good test scores, and it has to be this, and this, and I just wonder if a district, because SFUSD is doing so many great things, I just wonder, like, is it possible for a district now in 2017 to actually try to build political will for desegregation, or have we totally lost the whole integration fight?
That is a huge question. I mean, to me, it's not just about desegregation. It's around or segregation or racism. It's around proximity to whiteness. If we really want to look at a place like ours, where we are a majority-minority city, where I think we still are, who knows, with gentrification, that could change any day, right? Because I don't think it's necessarily about segregated schools, but it is very much around, I want the best for my kid. I think that a lot of families that I grew up with, because we had parents who were born on sort of the edges of the civil rights movements, whether they were born during it or right before it, they weren't necessarily old enough to participate in it. But as a result, we had a lot of community-oriented, it takes a village to raise a children type of environment. I also went to an alternative public school in the city where we called all our teachers by their first name, and it was just little hippie. So, we really cared about each other. Now we're back to this like level of individualism that I don't think race is as big of a factor as my kid has to get into this school because it'll set this future, because of this sports program, because of this academic program, and it becomes less around what's best for the school community and more on individual children. Don't get me wrong. I think it's fabulous that we've been engaging parents as much as we do. We have amazing sort of programs for parents to get involved in our city. It's just that we always only hear those squeaky wheels who are really advocating often from their own seat and less so from a community standpoint.
Yeah. And I also wanted to ask you about charters as well.
Sure.
Because, I taught at one, and you went to one, and it was the same one. And so can you say, because I had to decide to teach at one, and then you had to decide to go to one. Can you talk more about that?
Yeah. I talk about this all the time because I have to explain sort of my educational journey in my work a little bit. So third generation means that my mom, her mother, went to the same high school here in San Francisco, which is Mission High. Go Bears. My dad went there, and most of his brothers went there. One of my uncles went to Lowell. If you know San Francisco, you get what that means. Excuse me. Anyway, Mission was not a safe place when I was enrolling in school. I didn't even get Mission. I got assigned. I didn't get any of the schools that I had chosen. We were opting for smaller schools. I did go to a pretty traditional large middle school in the city. Maybe it's not large. Maybe it's medium. And so when it came time for decisions and I got placed at a school, that school was actually on the verge of shutting down. It doesn't, in fact, exist anymore. That would be McAteer. And so trying to find another option, my parents couldn't afford private school. That was in no way. I would have probably hated it, not my thing. And they chatted with some classmates who were all enrolling in this brand new public charter that was going to be this great experience. All these things were promised about how they were going to grow future young leaders, and we'd be in the first graduating class. I don't remember a lot other than I got in, and then those 4 years were very interesting as we built a school together. Some moments were awesome, some moments were harder. They didn't actually know if we were going to graduate for a while, but we did. The school's doing really well now. And so I often feel troubled by saying I went to a charter when I'm working so closely with the public school system here and because I believe in it. However, the nature of this particular charter, having been public, having been its own school and not part of a larger charter network, not being for-profit, etc., it still puts me in the place of being closer to having gone to just a regular public school. And now that we have so many small high schools by design in San Francisco, it feels like we're all part of the same family, if you will, so it doesn't feel as challenging. But, I get it. We needed the charter at the time. It wasn't just that those were the only two schools. It's that all of the schools at the time in San Francisco were problematic. I've had that confirmed by people who work in the district, that it was not a great time for high schools. It was not a great time for teenagers in San Francisco. And so we're in a totally different place now. Mission has a waiting list.
It's great.
It's amazing.
And Balboa is also doing
Balboa's doing great. All of our high schools have changed a lot. And frankly, if I had a kid who was high school age, I'd be comfortable with them going to most of them. Most. I even said, any of them, right? Anyone from work listening? All of them. Just kidding, but...
at the end of the article, there was this point about how racism is still racism. It just sort of changes.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you spotted that. It sort of hit me. Do you agree? Especially as because you're working so hard in San Francisco also for marginalized youth. You also worked in... you had to get those teachers every year, and you had to make sure to try to get... And then it was just... didn't it seem at some point that it was just a lot of work? And then
that last year, I thought, oh my God, I'm going to have to stand on a corner, especially, refer to articles about the teacher shortage nationally if you don't know about it. But I thought I was going to have to stand on a street corner with a sign that said, "Do you like kids?"
Right. And just come on in.
Just, hey, we'll fingerprint you and go from there.
Yeah. No, but do you... when we are in this work and when you're in this
Yeah.
work and you're just really working hard, and yet, she talks about how just racism is going to adapt.
Well, we have to adapt with it. That's unfortunately, that's unfortunately the reality, is that it's not going to go away. It's just going to change, so we kind of have to be on our toes and ready to change. And to a certain extent, like as a person of color who's, been a part of different communities that are across difference with my own affinity groups, like, that's what we do already. We got to kind of be ready to adapt, and I don't have an answer. No one ever does, but it's like, oh, okay, this is the new way racism is presenting itself to us today. I have some choices. Can I let it get me down? Can I react to it? Can I go home and figure out how to better react to it later? I mean, that's a pretty crummy summary, but that's what the choices are.
Well, that's my last question, is how do you sustain and then get energy to continue?
Like from a very practical standpoint, it's like choosing to not engage in certain things and choosing to engage in others. But I would say in the last year, I get to do work every day that really has significant impacts, even in the smallest gestures, on the experiences of young people. So my hope is that when I'm old and I need young people making decisions about how to best lead this country, maybe those folks will be in a better place because of this better life they're living. That was a horrible final point.
It was very great. It was very good.
It's true. It's corny, but it's true.
Thanks, Nikki. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. Thank you for doing this work.
Thank you for getting me into college.
Oh, that's so nice. Hope you enjoyed the interview with Nikki as much as I did. It was wonderful to talk with Nikki, as well as about an article that was written by Nikole Hannah-Jones. Never can go wrong with that. And I just wanted to let you know that if you enjoy what you're hearing, please get the word out about the podcast. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do over at Apple Podcasts. But the most important thing is, if you're not subscribed yet to the newsletter itself, that's probably the best place to start. And the short URL to make sure that you're subscribed is j.mp/thehighlighter, and that's all one word. So definitely check it out. I think that you'll totally like it. And until next week, when I'll have another person on the show, please have a wonderful week and look forward to the newsletter this Thursday. Have a great week.